Miguel?
Why they call me Pastor Leglocks.
Pastor Leglocks? That's a dope name.
You didn't know that?
No.
Yeah, I got a couple of nicknames.
I didn't even know that either.
Yeah, you didn't know that?
No.
Yeah, Pastor Leglocks, Pastor of Pain, God's Judgment, Angel of Death.
God's Judgment.
Yeah.
That one's good.
Ask Drew Phoenix about that one.
That's a good one. All right. So this one's a pretty interesting podcast for me because I'm not well versed in this ecological approach, which is not the approach that you guys encompass much more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really interested in this episode. So I'm going to let you guys go ahead and introduce yourself, your background, and then we'll jump right into it.
Okay.
So you want to start it off?
Yeah. So I'm Chase. I've been doing jiu-jitsu for now about 5-6 years now. Purple belt. Some of my accolades right now, most prominently, is in 2023. I won Pan American at Master 1, medium heavy, purple belt. And yeah, I'm still an active competitor. But outside of specifically jiu-jitsu, one of my biggest focuses is in strength and conditioning. A CSCS. So what that means is that I have a certification in strength and conditioning. And right now I'm pursuing my DPT, which is my doctorate in physical therapy.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that what I particularly want to bring to the table is how to do strength and conditioning for jiu-jitsu and how to make the most out of it more than anything else.
Right. So the approach would be specifically for jiu-jitsu athlete or grappling and encompasses all grapplers in a sense, right?
Yeah, I think that I think a lot of jiu-jitsu practitioners get strength and conditioning wrong. They have a perception when they see like an Arnold Schwarzenegger or like some sort of bodybuilder doing strength and conditioning, or even in a lot of cases, you'll see someone like a Gordon Ryan who is doing a lot of bodybuilding-esque exercises,
right?
And think that's what's the right thing to do.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Jose?
Yeah, I'm Jose. A black belt under Wagner Rocha, from white to black. And I've been training jiu-jitsu specifically going on my 9th year, and judo prior to that. Just actually picked it up again. Been training with Miguel that trains with us. He's actually a black belt under Kitsukai.
Okay, Kitsukai, yeah.
Yeah. So 12 years in judo, brown belt. Most notable accolades, I would say 2022 World Champion Masters 1, 2022 Pan American Champion Masters 1, multiple Opens champion, compete mostly at super heavy. I have now made the shift down, so I'm actually at heavyweight now. So
are you cutting?
I'm actually, this is my weight.
You're just going that, you're just dieted to that weight.
And he's still eating.
Still boy, I can eat. You have no idea. Like, I sit at 195 now.
Okay.
And I was at super heavy, like 220 walking around, and then I would cut down to like 215.
Oh, so you used to cut?
Yeah.
Okay.
So always been pretty stacked up, you know. I was an NPC competitor in my 20s.
NPC?
National Physique Competition.
Oh, really?
So yeah. So
that's like bodybuilding? Yeah. Okay.
So definitely familiar with strength and conditioning, but 100% am a grapplism follower, because let me tell you,
like that,
I will tell you that just testimonial, like there's exercises and things that Chase has taken me through. You probably would never know, but for the last 2 years, I've been battling with a torn meniscus.
Oh, really?
And yeah, it's been torn.
It's torn, but it's still torn?
It's torn, yeah. Like literally torn. He's seen the MRIs and everything. It reignited, I would say, last year, which is why my competition was minimal last year, because wanted to focus heavily on therapy and some of the things that he was drilling into me, like rest.
Right.
I didn't rest. So we're talking about training sometimes 2-3 times a day, 7 days a week. And
so your minimum is like a day is 2.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So now it's changed.
Rest is important.
Yeah. It's changed significantly a lot. Like, there'll be days where I just don't show up, you know, and he'll be like, man, I'm proud of you. You're actually resting. And I'm like, yeah, because I train a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely do. I definitely train a lot. I am a coach at VRMA. I'm actually one of the main coaches that's there.
That's cool.
So I actually co-coach the classes with Wagner.
Nice.
When Wagner's not there, I am coaching pretty much all the adult classes. My main professor is Adrian Benavidez.
Okay.
So he's been my main professor from white to black. And Wagner has been also that vocal professor and the one that kicks my ass. Yeah. So he definitely is he's kind of like the elusive unicorn.
The elusive unicorn?
Yeah, at VRMA. Like everybody wants to hunt him, but nobody can get him. You know, and every once in a while you might catch him like a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch or something like that, you know.
You think that you are like at 50-50 with him right when you start.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you get in like a little scramble and then it goes to like 55-45 and then it's slowly he just starts melting.
He just cooks you.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenon that I will tell you that, you know, I'm in my 40s.
Yeah.
So me and Wagner were only a year apart.
Okay.
And I've not been able to find that switch that he has. You know, I came close in 2022 to finding that switch.
Switch as in getting into a submission, or what do you mean?
No. I have sub V, but he subs me more. So I would say for like every 25 rolls, I might get one.
Okay.
So I probably, and that's fair to say.
Yeah.
You know, so what's that? A quarter? Like a quarter out of 100. So I'm getting a quarter. That's not too bad.
Quarter's good. I'll take a quarter.
I'll take a quarter. Trust me. He may say it's a little bit more than that. I'll say no.
Okay.
But I'll tell you that he has this on switch, and I would say that he operates more like a dimmer versus like a light switch. Light switch is on off.
I see what you're saying.
He's kind of like a dimmer. So we're going up, and it's getting brighter and brighter and brighter. Meanwhile, as he's getting brighter, I'm getting dimmer. You know, yeah. So he sits on you, and his 205 ends up feeling like 300 pounds real quick.
Oh.
And he was like that even when he was 77 kilos.
Oh.
It's crazy.
Yeah, he knows how to distribute weight.
Absolutely. Weight distribution, isometric strength is just on a whole nother level.
Jesus.
Yeah.
That sounds rough.
Absolutely. That's why, you know, I'm not afraid to compete. I'll go up against anybody. It's
right.
You know, I've trained with Cyborg. I've trained with Wagner. I'm like, none of you guys are going to give me the pressure.
Yeah, there's no way
that these guys would give me.
And you know what's funny about that too is that even though like Wagner feels really, really strong, he would probably fail at a lot of the athletic tests.
Absolutely.
More or less.
Really?
I've mentioned to many people, like not even just Wagner, but like Gordon Ryan, for instance, in the same way too. Like a lot of athletes that are in jiu-jitsu that would be put into sort of these athletic testing scenarios, they would probably fail most of them.
And why do you think that is?
Because it requires different capabilities. Like you don't have to be the fastest person to do and excel in jiu-jitsu.
Right.
More or less, it's a lot of skill development around it. And then you have to develop more or less a lot of strength, but you don't have to be maximally strong in terms of like lifting a weight overhead.
Right. So what is the type of approach that you would use in order to develop a jiu-jitsu athlete in the terms of the muscles that they would use and how they would compete? I'm assuming there's a lot of elements that go into it. Let's just start with what elements should an athlete really focus on when it comes to training?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely falls down into like if we were to put a graph, and if people are watching this, I'm doing a graph with my hands over here. And what I would say is that there's a line that goes through, and at the top of the line is maximal force, and at the bottom of the line, this curve here is just speed.
Oh, okay.
So it's called the force velocity curve.
Right.
And what you want to focus on as an athlete is, let's say you're super, super strong, but you're not super, and you're really moving slow, like kind of like that ultra heavy athlete. Or if you're super fast and you have no strength to you, so you're on this side of the spectrum, like you're super fast, but have no strength.
Yeah.
You want to get somewhere in the middle where that's kind of like speed strength or power output. And
you would say that every athlete would want to kind of seek that balance between right in the middle, right?
Yeah, specifically jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
Like as a combat athlete, you want to lean towards explosive power output as one of your energy systems that allows you to excel in the sport.
Okay.
So it kind of pushes you beyond. So like someone being able to explosively leg drag someone and then pivot around them.
Right.
That's the difference between like milliseconds of gaining a stronger position or not.
Right.
Even though someone may have better technique or not. Look at someone like a Nicky Rod. He doesn't really excel in regards to the top echelon of skill.
Right.
He kind of just goes for the same thing
Right.
over and
Yeah,
over and
yeah,
over
Body
again.
lock pass.
Body lock pass.
But he's a genetic beast. Like
Right.
he has a lot of points about him that make him a lot more special than other people. And he
Right.
kind of really hammers in on that. Another person would probably be like, even though he's incredibly skilled in wrestling, is look at like a Dorian Alvarez,
Okay.
right? Who won EDC trials in East Coast, and he was just running circles around people, incredibly explosive.
Yeah. So you're saying that physicality, or what I'm understanding is you're saying that if you can get that physicality to a certain point, it will allow you to dominate certain transactions on the mat to get to those favorable positions, which wouldn't allow you if you were more technical, let's say, or because you're missing the speed or the strength, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So if you're on the more of like the maximal strength side,
Right.
you want to do more speed work or more things that are going to make the bar move faster in the gym, right? Because that's what's going to take you from the maximal strength side to kind of curving it down towards the middle or power output. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, if you're just focusing on speed work, and you're a really speedy guy, and you're just doing like agility ladders, till you die,
right.
You're not getting anywhere with that.
Right, you're gonna be more of the same.
Yeah.
So it's got to be. I guess it varies depending on the athlete that you're going with. If you have a super strong guy, you're gonna have to develop that speed and kind of get him to that middle because you don't want him to lose his strength at the same time.
No, you definitely don't. You got to work every single cylinder.
How do you do that? How do you create those evaluations?
Evaluations, I think that you have to see what they do in the gym. You got to do maximal testing in terms of like their strength, and you have to do speed testing as well
in the gym, like since it's for
gym or the park or anything like that.
Right, like what I mean, like if it's in the gym, in the sense that if we're dealing with jiu-jitsu athletes, are you going to still do those tests, or are you going to do them relating to their style in jiu-jitsu? You get what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, you can't be super sports specific with the gym, because if like I see it all the time with a lot of people on Instagram and social media,
right?
They'll do a lot of like strength specific exercises for jiu-jitsu, where they're doing like a banded guard retention or something like that,
right?
Like you can't really test for that, because once you start trying to load something like that, for instance, and what's the qualification to say like this is what you want to strengthen up,
right? More
than anything else. So what happens on the first end, if you're trying to strengthen that, and I know that I'm not really answering your question right now,
no,
but
I'm following you.
But if you're trying to like add load to say like, I don't know, a guard retention, what happens is that you actually ruin the timing of that complex movement.
Okay.
So rather than doing a more generalized movement in the gym.
Add load. Sorry, I apologize.
Yeah.
Add load
like a rubber band around the waist.
Okay.
And somebody shooting double legs.
Yeah.
Okay. So adding like resistance.
Yeah, like say I'm holding a rubber band, right? Ideally,
sure.
I'm holding a rubber band behind Chase, and Chase is shooting double legs against a bag or something, or against a person that's in front of him.
Okay.
Yeah. Or even like I've seen people with like full on weighted vest, for instance. And it goes into kind of like a little bit of like the ecological approach, where sometimes there's a line to be played there.
Right.
With like, I know that Greg Souders is kind of flirting around with the idea of using like differential learning, which is like creating different stimuluses to introduce on the mats so people can learn in different ways. Like in the way they do in basketball is like sometimes they'll use a smaller ball instead of a basketball in order to, when they pass to one another, in order to teach the skill of like passing, for instance.
Oh, cool.
So like that's an example of differential learning. So I've seen some people try to implement something like that, where you can look it up on YouTube, and like they're putting like water bags on themselves.
Right.
But the thing is with like stability and stuff like that, you can't really teach that outside of just doing the sport. Stability doesn't really
especially if it's sports specific. Like you can't really teach, I mean, from what I'm understanding is you can't really teach stability in the gym for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, like you're just getting better at holding a water bag over your head. You're not getting better at jiu-jitsu.
That makes sense. So I mean, this is pretty interesting. You guys jumped into the ecological approach of coaching, and to my understanding, that's an element of what you guys are doing together when preparing athletes. Why don't we get into that? Why don't we talk about what is you guys are trying to your approach and how you got there and how you're refining it? So I think that's probably a good way to start. Look at it as a whole.
So we're kind of like a little small core right now.
Okay.
And when I say small core, it's probably just maybe about a handful to 2 handfuls of people
Okay.
that are really like doing this systemized training with us. Just so you know, an ecological system to learning is not a new concept
Okay.
at all. It's become a fad, which the jiu-jitsu community is notorious for chasing after. You look at things like, for example, Footlocks in 2017.
Barambolos back in the day.
Yeah, Barambolos back in the day. All of a sudden, everybody wants to, hit the bolo.
Yeah.
Or what was it? A couple of years ago, maybe like 4 years ago, the crab rides. Everybody,
Right.
okay, let's forget the bolos. Let's go crab ride.
Right.
So, and now the new fad is let's all wrestle. So yeah, because wrestling was boring in 2017. It doesn't sell. It doesn't put butts in the seats. And now everything is, well, you got to have your wrestling. And, if Danaher says it's wrestling time, it's wrestling time,
Right.
So when you talk about the ecological approach, just so you know, my background in this, I have a master's in mental health counseling. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. My non-superhero day job is I do work for the Department of Defense as a mental health counselor.
That's kind of a superhero. It's the reverse of what you're saying.
So I feel more like a superhero when I have the kimono on. So it's like, I'm Clark Kent when I'm sitting in my day job. But I actually run the whole military health network for South Florida.
Wow.
West Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade County. Every major military base, I'm the guy.
Okay.
So yeah, I am the guy. So from an ecological standpoint, it's basically taking the cognitive development with the environmental stimulus and how the two relate to one another.
Okay.
A more practical approach would even be like measuring air pollution, right? This is something that is often done. Measuring air pollution in different cities.
Okay.
The one common denominator would be the air pollution.
Right.
The different cities would be the environmental stimulus.
Okay.
So, for example, if I'm in LA, right? I'm in a valley, I've got buildings,
right?
I've got smog. The air pollution is going to stay there a lot different,
right?
Versus if I'm in Miami, I'm on the edge of the water, all of a sudden we've got air pollution. We can keep that air pollution constant in terms of like the type of cars that are driving around, that type of nature. But what you'll see here in Miami is that it's much more like open. We're not in a valley. So there's much more clarity in our air versus say LA. When you're flying into LA, you can actually see the smog just hanging over the helm of the city itself.
Because of the environment.
Absolutely.
Right.
So how that corresponds and translates to a jiu-jitsu setting is the development of the athlete in relationship to the environmental stimulus.
Okay.
So what type of, I'll use the term dilemma,
right,
is the athlete being approached with, and what is now their response to that dilemma? How are they corresponding or reacting in relationship to where they are as an athlete to how they're being attacked?
Right.
From an opponent or a training partner, what have you. So a good example of that would probably be, we always talk about the locking triangle, which Greg Souders talks a lot about as well. If I'm going to lock a triangle, how do we lock a triangle? How are we doing that? So sometimes the stimulus will be standing. Sometimes the stimulus will be kneeling. Sometimes the stimulus will be pulling back. Sometimes the stimulus will be pressuring forward. So what we really try to do is emulate certain responses from whatever the stimulus is in concordance with our development of knowing how to close a triangle. Well, you got to isolate an arm. You got to.
You're saying in accordance with our development. Right?
Absolutely.
So there's another element to just not the ecological, but there's another element as well.
Correct. So this is why I say jiu-jitsu is kind of on the fad cycle. Because I believe that a lot of what is being perpetrated as ecological training is not, in fact, actual ecological training. It's just small roles.
Okay.
And it really is, because I've seen it. I've had the opportunity to kind of explore and things like that. because I'm really big into this whole community jujitsu thing, which we'll talk about in a moment.
Okay.
But I've had the opportunity to observe what some people call ecological training. And to me, it's nothing more than just glorified specific training,
Okay.
which looks like a mini role.
Okay.
You
That's
know,
what you're saying. Like
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like a situational
Yeah.
type of approach.
Yeah. So when we're talking about ecological training, there has to be tested variables. And I think that that's something that Greg Souders does phenomenally.
Mhm.
It's something that I've done for years as a therapist. It's being able to test variables. So what a lot of people don't do, and I think they don't do this because they're not coming from it from a professional approach. They're coming more from I saw this on YouTube. I thought it was cool.
Mhm.
And hey, let's do it. You know, it's
Right.
kind of like the white belt that comes up to the professor and says, hey, I saw this cool move
I got a
on
bolo.
YouTube. Yeah.
Let me hit it.
Yeah, let me do it. Let me show you this, coach. And
Yeah.
you're like, oh my God, this sucks.
Well, it definitely requires a lot more study than just as the example that you said that they see it on YouTube, because it also the change in the coach, the responsibility of the coach changes a lot.
Absolutely.
Because you're the one, essentially you go from a direct approach where you're kind of teaching techniques, and if you go extremely ecological, you're kind of just becoming the architect of the situation that's going on, or of the experiment.
Right.
So if you just go with an approach that it's, I'm just going to do this, then you're really not doing any benefit.
Right. But
Right?
you got to
Is that what you're
still,
saying?
you still have to have a baseline. And I think that that's kind of like what's missing with a lot of what a lot of people is that in order for any of these functional educational models to work, for example, you don't just have ecological learning, you've got systemic learning.
Mm-hmm.
You have differential type of learning. There's different types of learning. I could sit here and have you here for like the whole day if we talk about learning models. I worked with the school systems. I worked on various learning models. I worked with individualized educational plans. I actually did my daughter's IEP. So yeah, so from grade 5.
Wow.
So yeah, she's now a junior in high school, and I've had to reshift the variables time and time again. Like for example, I'll give you my ecological approach with my daughter. So my daughter does not do well with testing, like I don't as well. You know, many people have what they call like testing anxieties and stuff like that. And it doesn't matter how intelligent you are, but you have to have kind of like this baseline constant. What's the baseline constant? The baseline constant is what the teacher taught you.
Okay.
Right. So 2 + 2 is 4. Right.
You might have said the wrong number there.
I know that would have sucked, right?
You failed.
2 + 2 is 8. Like, no, man, what's wrong with you?
Negative something.
You need ecological. No, I'm just. So we have a baseline, right? The baseline is what was learned, okay? But learning is not execution, and there's a big difference.
Okay.
Execution is something that has to be tested.
Okay.
All right. It's almost like if I build a gun. If I build a gun, I've built the weapon itself, but whether or not it works is if I put it through its testing.
Right. Okay.
So from a schematics standpoint, my daughter, her baseline is 2 + 2 is 4.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you for repeating it.
Yeah. It's 2 + 2 is 4. And that's her baseline. But now she comes to a state testing. And all the anxieties are up, and now we're starting to move her into a different environmental stimulus. Okay. It's a new opponent, right? Think about it like that. It's a brand new opponent. You're in the second round of your IBJJF Open, and it's a brand new opponent. This brand new opponent is known as FSA or FCAT. It used to be FCAT, or now it's FAST, FAST.
Right. Oh, wow.
Okay. Yeah. So they changed that yesterday. Yeah. They changed it. Right. So the new stimulus, the new round, the new opponent. You like that round. You know what I'm saying? So now that you have this new stimulus, there are certain parameters that you have to change that will elicit a certain cognitive response to that new stimulus. Right. And that is an ecological learning model. So what are some of those stimulus that I did for my daughter? Well, I recognized that my daughter needed an extra 10 minutes. Okay. Of testing time. Okay. And that was to accommodate for the anxiety. Okay. So part of the IEP was to add an extra 10 minutes for her testing. Okay. Another thing was my daughter required headphones.
Okay.
So that if she read a question a certain way and did not understand it through reading, then she could hear it verbalized through like an AI type voice
Right.
that would speak with such clarity.
Right.
You know, I gotta
Yeah.
say that. Such clarity.
I'm glad you emphasized on that word.
You know,
It'd be bad if you messed up that
yeah,
word.
I know, right?
Clarus.
You know, but that will speak with such clarity so that she could hear the stimulus
Right.
and now be able to respond. What do you get when you have the number 2 added to the number 2?
That's awesome.
You know, and then she's like, oh, 4.
Right.
Okay. So how does that translate to like in the jiu-jitsu setting?
Yeah.
Right. So you have the athlete. The athlete is now introduced to a different environmental stimulus.
Mm.
That athlete now has to be able to be programmed to respond to that different environmental stimulus. It might mean that the athlete needs to slow down, okay? Which would be like more time to learning.
Okay.
Perhaps they're used to just going fast all the time. But if that particular opponent happens to be, you know, your zip through guy, your runner, that guy that he's the super athletic guy that just likes to run. Like when I roll with spazzy white belts.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
I can think of a couple.
Yeah, I can think of a couple too. I love you guys. But when I roll with a spazzy white belt, I kid you not, I literally just sit my butt there, let them move around, let them move. I grab a 2-on-1 grip and it's over.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like an alligator just grabbing its prey.
Right.
Okay. So funny enough, mentioning alligators, right? A lot of people don't know this, but alligators are probably the best example of ecological studies.
Really?
So an alligator is very selective in how it responds to its stimulus,
Okay.
because alligators actually have, because they're cold-blooded, they actually produce a lot of lactic acid.
That makes sense. Okay.
So this is how you have like guys that can sit on top of them and start playing with their mouth and stuff like that. Or a bird will sit on top of them and he'll never attack them.
Yeah.
And you're like, here we got this creature that's, you know, ancient and deadly. He's not doing, and it's the reason why is because the minute that he moves his body, he literally goes on a time clock of 3 minutes.
Really?
Yeah. His body can only function for 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, he turns petrified for 4 hours.
Kind of like the spazzy white belt?
Yeah. Huh?
Kind of like the spazzy white belt?
Exactly. Kind of like the spazzy white
Oh,
belt.
so they don't want to fight you.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're not, they're picking and choosing their battles.
Right.
And it kind of goes into the ecological model of jiu-jitsu, because when you as the actual individual are presented to a different environmental stimulus,
Mm-hmm.
you now have to be able to accommodate to that stimulus
Right.
based on how that stimulus approaches you. All right. So you got spazzy people.
Right.
You've got stallers.
Right.
You've got people who pass standing.
Mm-hmm.
You got people who pass kneeling. You got when you're passing, maybe you're a mobile guy.
Right.
Maybe you don't have good top pressure. So what we try to do is we try to introduce these different stimuluses, okay, or stimuli, I should say. We try to introduce these different stimuli in a collaborative setting with different body types.
Okay.
All right. We'll have some big guys. We'll have some small guys, some medium guys. And we'll play different games.
Okay. So
Okay.
that approach from what I'm getting that is it kind of helps, and correct me if I'm wrong on this one, it will kind of help the athlete learn to adapt when different stimuli is introduced.
Absolutely.
That's kind of the reasoning behind the ecological approach, is that adaptation.
Absolutely. It is an adaptation to whatever stimulus is there.
Which is probably not given when you I don't want to say traditional style training, but in traditional style training, it's probably since you don't have that change in environment, right? You won't have to develop that adaptation to it.
Right. Traditional training. So I kind of came up.
But shouldn't there be, this might be a random question, but I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
also.
you're good. You're good.
Shouldn't there be, and this is just me asking, shouldn't there be a balance between the two?
Absolutely. Which is why, you know, and I'm sure Chase would agree with this, we don't come from a crystallized model.
Okay.
You know, crystallization is basically the hardness model. It's, you know, the old school we're going to drill. Drillers are killers. And I'm all for drilling. Don't get me wrong. But drilling is such a loaded word.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's almost like when somebody comes up to you and they say, hey, how you feeling today? Wow, that's a loaded question. You know, because you could have had one hell of a day.
Right.
You know what I mean? But drilling is such a loaded word because ecological training is drilling.
Right.
It's just a different approach. Systemic training is drilling. So for example,
what do you mean by, I'm sorry.
Okay. So systemic training would be more of a Danaher model.
Okay.
All right. So this would be a systems approach. So,
oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here I am. I'm in butterfly guard. I get an underhook. I elevate my partner, and I kind of backstep into inside Senkaku.
Right.
Once I'm in inside Senkaku, I get a scoop grip on the primary leg. From the scoop grip on the primary leg, I utilize the far side leg to I utilize the far side arm to grab the double trouble on the secondary leg. From there, I'm now in the double trouble position. I establish a leg lace to establish much firmer control with a ankle lock position on the outside leg, lacing to the primary leg. And now I'm in the cloverleaf position.
Right.
All right. From there, I can unlock, go back into scoop grip, underhook my partner with the far side arm, and then enter into the double knee cut position, now going into side control.
Okay.
So this is a whole systemic approach, understanding that just the way that I explained it to you.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Like most people are like, huh? You know,
or a little bit kind of like that.
And you need both.
You do.
You definitely need both, because you have on one end, you have explanatory knowledge, just like what you're saying from a systemic standpoint. And then you have non-explanatory knowledge. So those are the two different things. Like you have, for instance, like I think about like AOJ, for instance, like they drill like crazy.
Right.
But I don't think the drilling is correlated with the results.
Okay.
I think it's more or less has to do with the actual sparring. And there's some things systemically happening with them. Let's say like a Tynan, where he's doing such minute movements that he can't even explain that you can't get from alone from just doing that specific approach of systemic training.
Right? Yeah. So there's things that he's learning in that, in the other approach. He's doing what he learned systemically, let's just say. Not learn systemically, but he's applying what he learned in the system. But because he's doing it, or because he did it in another, I guess, the ecological approach, we can call it, there's things that he learned that he didn't even know that he was doing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, he can't even explain it. If I feel like there's if you go on like BJJ Fanatics, for instance, and you go on anyone that's not John Danaher and Gordon,
right,
you start to notice the people that are at the top, they have an incredibly hard time explaining themselves, even though they're incredibly good at what they do and they're practitioners. So that's like the clear indication of someone being able to translate some of the non-explanatory into explanatory.
Correct.
Yeah, and I think that gives a certain element of, it shows how important it is that you have a good coach that's able to understand those variables and understand the need for those two things. Because anybody can open up a shop and be like, oh, I can teach this, but what's the quality of training? Is your coaches really going to that level to understand that? I think it's very important that you guys are pointing that out.
And I think also from what Jose was saying, you have to have different levels in terms of intensity. What you bring to the mat.
Correct.
Because if you're going at 100% every single time, you're going to run yourself to the ground.
Right.
Especially as like you continue to get older and older and older. There's kind of like a sine wave that's happening. Like you remember in school. The sine wave is just that wave that you're riding in terms of your energy.
Right.
Like how much you're pushing out. And let's just use an example. When you're doing the sine wave and you're doing it 3 times a day or 2 times a day.
Can you get a little bit closer to the mic? Sorry, man. I can't hear you.
You're good.
Yeah.
So you do like 3 times a day, and all of a sudden, when you're supposed to be resting, you just start going lower and lower and lower. And you're
supposed to be resting.
Yeah, exactly. So you're peaking out, you're going up to the top, you're peaking out, you're feeling incredible, but you just did too much too soon, and you just start crashing. And instead of going maybe like over here at like a level 2, you go to like a -1, for instance, and you have way more room that you have to catch up with in terms of rest, that you have to just relax. And that's where injury starts to happen, things of that sort.
Right. You didn't rest.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
You didn't rest.
No, definitely. And I've seen that.
So the guy trained 7 days a week, 3 times, 2 times a week.
I mean, I still do train 7 days a week.
Yeah.
I do. It's just the way that I train has changed.
Oh,
so
okay.
Chase Chase can attest for this, and all my training partners can attest for this. And I'm not saying this out of pride, but I'm strong as hell. Okay,
Yeah.
I kid you not. Like,
No, I believe you.
I can sit there and I posted a little funny spoof on my stories the other day about
Yes.
fake. What was it? Fake
Influencers.
Fake influencers. Because, dude, let me tell you, and we kind of have like a group chat with another buddy of mine, buddy of ours actually, who's also super intelligent, and we kind of like share like this between that and food, right?
Yeah.
That and food and jujitsu and criticisms of moves and all that stuff.
Some
So,
philosophy.
yeah, philosophy, bro. I tell you, it's like it's like a whole group of like philosophy, thought, food, jujitsu,
Bashing influencers.
yeah. There's just some stuff out there, man. I'm not going to mention who this was, but anyway, I was kind of spoofing off of it. Basically, what was happening was is that I was in the gym, I'm working out, and this guy who I think was a trainer there goes on IG Live, and I'm watching this guy on IG Live, and he's sitting here and he's doing squats, and he's not even fully bending his knee. Like right now, we're sitting in a chair,
Right.
and I'm at kind of like a little more than 90 degrees right here, which this is a pretty decent squat. This is a good squat, right? Would
That
you
you're
say?
supposed to go lower than that?
Yeah, they call it ass to grass.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah.
I'm not a fitness guy. I don't know.
Yeah, so I like to go. It depends what I'm trying to get out of it. You know, I've actually found a lot of benefit nowadays. And this is partly to Chase is box squats. I've been doing a lot of box squats.
Okay.
And they've been actually helping my knees. They've been helping my ligaments. Everything. So I feel strong. So I'll start off with like box squats and then I'll do traditional squats.
Okay.
Anyhow, so I'm watching this guy. He goes up. He puts on 315 pounds.
Puts on the bar.
On the bar. And he's sitting here and he's squatting his knees. And I'm like, wow, this guy must have some strong kneecaps. I'm like, who does that? So I'm joking around. So I get my phone. I had a friend of mine there and they start filming. And I'm sitting there and I just put on 225 on the bar. And I'm like lifting it like nothing. And I'm sitting here like, I kid you not, just banged out 15 reps like nothing.
Jeez.
I'm swinging the bar around. I'm talking with the bar in my hand, just talking. And to the point that I was making is that I'm extremely strong.
Yeah.
Okay. And going back to something that we said a moment ago, when it comes to Wagner, right? Wagner is not physically strong.
Right.
When it comes to like weightlifting.
Like gym strong.
Gym strong. Like I have lift with Wagner and have seen Wagner struggle with 135 on the bench.
Okay.
That's yeah. And I mean he can bang him out now.
Yeah.
Okay. But he, it's never been his point. But man, let me tell you something. You get that guy on top of you, and he'll admit this. He always says this. He's like, I'm not the most athletic. I'm not the strongest guy in the gym. I just work hard and things like that. He has this isometric strength when he puts those ape hands on you. All right. He holds on to something, or like our other training partner, Rafael Diaz, he's a 5th degree black belt. He grabs a headlock on you, bro.
You're not going anywhere.
You're not going anywhere. You're not. All right. Or someone like Mello, right?
Yeah.
Mello grabs a butterfly grip on your heel. It's over, bro.
It's gone.
Same with Juan Rosales. He grabs, Juan Rosales is the only guy I know that is the embodiment of submission before position.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They say position before submission. He literally goes heel hook first grip and then enters into the position. and you're sitting here like, what the heck? Because he just got this isometric strength that when he holds on to something, you're not going anywhere. Or even the Maheka brothers.
Okay.
You sit there, you train with Kevin and Brian.
Yeah.
Bro, Kevin Maheka make you look like a white belt.
Yeah.
It's true.
No,
and
but I've heard that.
He's
from a lot
not
of
like
people.
crazy strong, because when I'm rolling with them, I don't feel like they're crazy strong. But dude, when he pins you, you can't do a damn thing. And you're sitting here like, why can't I move my legs? I squat 405. Why can't I move my legs? And I'm like, I can deadlift this guy. Why can't I break his spider guard? Like, what's going on?
Just stand up, bro. Stand up.
Just stand up. Yeah. You would think, right? You would think. But what I'm trying to say is that gym strength does not translate into jujitsu strength. And a lot of that does not mean that you're going to be successful, especially when it comes to the ecological model that we've been talking about.
Right.
You have to have a baseline of understanding of what techniques are.
Okay.
So there is teaching. Instruction is important.
Yeah.
All right. And then discovery is equally as important.
Okay, so that's like after you do the drills, like what you collect.
Right. And that's where the ecological model and even the systemic approach really do come in, because it's in that point of discovery where you recognize a few variables. Like number one, did I have to use a lot of strength on this? Because if you had to use a lot of strength on that, then your technical approach was probably not as strong.
Right.
All right. The other thing to consider is, are you constantly struggling with this technique?
Right.
And is it a technical flaw?
Right.
Or is it a ergonomic flaw?
Right.
An anatomic flaw? Because I'm a firm believer that not everybody can lock triangles.
Or it's even psychological.
Or
too.
even psychological from a cognitive standpoint.
Yeah.
How do you measure those things?
Well, for me, for example, perfect example.
Is it the individual that needs to measure that?
I was afraid to wrestle.
Okay.
And afraid to do judo.
Okay.
For some time. Because my knee was bothering me.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
So I would be afraid to shoot. I would be afraid to do this.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, Chase would tell me to rest. He'd give me some exercises that I needed to work, some different movements that help loosen up like my IT band and things like that, to create more mobility in this knee. And sometimes you just gotta kind of take a step of faith,
Right.
and I started doing it again. I'm like, oh, okay. It holds up, know, and you kind of learn through discovery, like what things you can and cannot do. Like I also have a completely torn rotator cuff.
Okay.
You can see I got full
rotation,
external rotation on this arm and outside, but that's it.
Right.
And that's it.
Right.
So, and to my credit, this is actually better than some normal people.
Yeah.
All right. And for the longest time, I was afraid to play guard on my left side because of the pressure that would be brought on my arm.
From doing the frames.
Absolutely.
Right.
And you start to learn from an ecological standpoint on, how to readjust yourself, how to enter into different things, what things you need to do, like the collar and sleeve we'd be doing.
Yeah. It's all about compensations at the end of the day.
Right.
Like, the human body is just a compensation machine.
Right. Yeah. And if you don't put yourself in that position in order to learn it, it's going to be, obviously well, you guys would tell me better, but there's a moment of that you need to kind of, the recovery is not the word. You need to, when you get an injury, you need to rehab it. Right. There's an element of rehab, but there is a moment that you're going to have to take a risk to kind of figure out what it is that's going on.
Test it. He talks a lot about that.
Test it.
He talks a lot about testing it.
Is there a moment that you can kind of feel safe to be like, okay, I'm going to try this out?
Yeah. So
like, can you pinpoint that moment when an athlete has an injury and he's been rehabbing and be like, okay, now's a good moment to test it out? I
mean, first thing first, always see a doctor. Like,
right.
I think I'm not a doctor.
Right.
I mean, I was struggling with 2 + 2.
This is not medical advice.
But it's not medical advice. But keep in mind, there's usually when it comes to pain in particular, sometimes people don't realize that hurt and harm are two different things.
Right.
So, like, to kind of give you the example, you can feel like, especially with jiu-jitsu, a lot of pain in your back.
Right.
A lot of people that I work with in jiu-jitsu, they usually have a lot of back pain.
Right.
And it's usually because of overuse.
Right.
And I hear some people, like, I can give an example for myself. This is long before I was really deep in this. I remember I was just training so crazy, like probably to the level of what Jose was doing. And this was like I was prepping for PANs a while back, earlier PANs. And I remember I was training at the Quarantine, if you're familiar with them.
No.
So it was like the Meow Brothers, Gianni Grippo,
okay,
a number of guys over there when I was still in New York.
Okay.
And we were all prepping for PANs. And I remember I had a footlock on this guy and I overcompensated with my lower back and all I felt was a pop. And I was like, never felt that. And I literally couldn't get up. It was so bad. And it got to the point where I got back home. I drove home. I sat down on the couch for a little while. And all of a sudden, my back seized up and I was screaming on the top of my lungs. It was really bad. So I bring up the story. And it got to the point where I had to go ahead and I was like, there's no way I didn't pull my back out. Like, right. I didn't herniate my disc or anything like that.
Yeah.
I went to the hospital. Like, I literally had, I kid you not, like, I had to go in a wheelchair and everything, get to the hospital.
Fuck.
And They scanned my back and everything. Totally fine. Totally fine.
Interesting.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that there's a difference between hurt and harm.
Right.
Sometimes in that case, it has to do with overuse.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, and your body just can't handle it, like neurologically.
Yeah. So like for example, I got a rib injury,
Mhm.
and I thought for sure I broke my rib. I wasn't able to lay down. This was 2 years. It reactivated like a month ago, but like when I hit my rib, I wasn't able to really sit up or lay on my back. So I went to the hospital thinking, oh, I broke a rib. Something popped. Nothing.
Yeah. And
Chase
it goes
broke
the
my
other-
rib once.
That's got to be so
I?
painful.
No,
Did you really?
You remember when you popped?
Maybe
it,
I can now. I'm like
Yeah.
220.
I was like,
He did
Yeah.
pop my rib though, right before pans.
but like broken.
No, it just popped. Remember?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's
it was my
usually,
fault though.
contusion?
I actually did it. Yeah.
It's usually either the tissues in between the ribs.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it's like usually like a muscle pop.
Yeah.
But yeah, even on the other end of the spectrum, like you can be actually harmed and not hurt. So
See, you can get an injury, and because can I call like injury
like actually harm, like
harm, like an injury, like you can get an injury without feeling it.
yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
like you're in competition, you have endorphins running through you,
Oh,
and
okay.
you get your foot broken, and then like you don't feel anything.
Right.
So
Okay.
that's an example of like having harm but no hurt there.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
sometimes people don't feel anything.
Yep.
So what I'm trying to say is that nociception or pain reception
Yeah.
in the body is a completely different pathway from the rest of the body and how it's
Okay.
received from the brain and the spinal cord.
Right.
So what you want to do is understand that you have a full cup in mind when it comes to pain. And this is what I work with a lot of clients, that they have to understand when it comes to pain, it's not just jujitsu and the amount of volume you do in jujitsu or in the gym. Sometimes I'll ask them like, oh, how far do you drive to work? How many hours are you at work?
Right.
How's family life like?
Oh, I see.
things-
So that all accumulates, is what you're saying.
Yes. So
Absolutely.
psychological stress in general has a lot to do with not just like this cup, which starts to overfill, becomes pain, but also a lot of chronic disease as well.
Mm,
And they're starting to link a lot of the chronic disease today, such as like heart disease, just anything from there, like psychological issues
Yeah.
are all leading back to psychological
to that
stress.
chronic.
Yeah,
To that
to that
pain.
chronic psychological stress.
Absolutely.
That's crazy.
Absolutely.
That's crazy. So that's. I mean, it seems like what you guys are, because you guys work with athletes, right? You guys are kind of developing this approach to help athletes compete. It seems like you're covering all the bases when it comes to that psychological aspect and how it influences your training, but also getting certain concepts for training the athlete technically and physically, right?
Yeah.
How do you guys go from evaluating an athlete to putting together a program with, obviously without like complete detail, just kind of generalized? Like, how do you go from like evaluating and be like, okay, this is the program that's for him, and then walking him through the competition? Because you guys had some better. I think you were also a kind of byproduct of the program that you guys are doing. How did you guys start from the evaluation stage and get to that success in competition?
Yeah. I mean, one thing I know for sure when me and Jose like work together, Jose is and we follow a very similar approach, which is minimal dose, like
Minimal dose.
like a minimal dosage, the minimum viable dosage more than anything else. So like there's like the max effort, and then there's the minimum viable dose. We kind of find out where that line is,
Okay.
and then we
Steady
can work,
medium.
and then we can kind of work from there. Even though it may not be the adaptation of being all the way near the top where the maximum is, we at least know that at that baseline here that we can work our way up
Okay.
and start to play around with the variables more
It's,
than anything
it's
else.
not everyday pojada, in other words.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not, and I know that's where it kind of rubs some of the old school mindset the wrong way.
Yeah.
Because going back to something that I was talking about earlier when I was
Sure.
talking about being strong.
Yeah.
Most people that have rolled with me will tell you that I'm very technical and flowy,
Okay.
and I don't use a lot of strength. And the reason why is because most of the time when I'm rolling, I'm maybe rolling at like 60, 70%.
Mm.
And there's reasons for that. One big reason is psychological.
Okay.
There's a mindset that you have to put yourself into
Mm-hmm.
when you're about to get ready to go, balls to wall. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's gonna be like two rams just banging each other out. If you don't put yourself in that mindset, which is a competition mindset, a competitive mindset,
Right.
what ends up happening is that within the training room, you can develop anxiety.
Mm.
You can freak out. I've had a panic attack in the middle of training.
Really?
Like, I kid you not. Like I'm rolling with Wagner one day. This is like 2022. I'm rolling with Wagner one day. And then all of a sudden, you know, I'm like,
Right.
and yeah,
I'm dying.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm dying. I can't breathe.
Yeah.
I can't breathe. And I like rip off my shirt. I'm like walking outside. Everybody's looking at me. He's like, Jose, you're breathing. You're talking to me. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, just the overwhelming sense of pressure that was happening in the middle of that roll. And I think we were like 8 minutes into that round.
And it wasn't the physical aspect. It was a kind of a psychological aspect. You think
it was a physical roll.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
okay,
So
okay.
it was a competitive round going more than 75%, not being psychologically ready. There's a lot of people that have different triggers. Like, so for me, for example, if you ever look at any of my fight footage, if you look before I walk onto the mat, I always have like a little ritual.
Yeah. And
my little ritual is that I hit my face 3 times. Okay.
That's very judo of you.
Yeah. I'm just saying,
wrestling.
I hit my face like 3 times. I crank my back out, and then I'm ready to go. And that is a signal to me, or an antecedent to me. Antecedent for the viewers is an internal or external force that elicits reaction or behavior.
Right.
Okay. So that is an external force, an antecedent.
It's kind of get it to let you know we're about to do something.
Yes. That it triggers me and it tells me it is now go time.
Right.
What you as the athlete have to develop is the part of your mind that says, I know when it's go time, or when it's drill time, or when it's training time. I have seen people.
It has to be developed, is what you're saying.
Right. It has to be developed, but there also needs to be a consensus, which I know some people may not like to hear this, but I do believe that there are certain roles that you need to say no to. Okay. And I'm just putting this out there.
No, yeah.
There are certain roles that you need to say no to. And I'll use myself as an example. I also had a heart attack in 2022. I had a stent go through my arm and all the way to my heart. I had a minor heart attack.
Okay.
I had 2 EKGs that came back really bad. And then by the third one, everything was okay. No blockages, nothing. What was happening?
I don't know. What was
psychological,
really?
Psychological stress of things at work, psychological stress in things in my relationships.
So maybe it wasn't a panic attack.
No. Well, here's the thing. You mind if I get a little sciencey with you?
Sure. Go ahead.
So
please.
The jiu-jitsu athlete today is a nerd, just so you know.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. Some of your favorite athletes today, guys, are nerds. So check this out.
The top ones, for sure.
The baseline of a panic attack is when your amygdala, okay? The amygdala is the signal part in the brain which responds to triggers. Okay. These triggers, also known as stimuli, they activate what's known as the flight or fight responses within the brain. What happens is that your amygdala starts to light up, and then it starts to send signals to your cerebellum. Your cerebellum is the most primitive part of your brain. Okay. That's where your hormones and your pituitary gland and everything, that's where your cortisol levels come from. So how you are wired, or how you have wired your brain, now begins to interpret this overload of your body, now receiving this overload of hormonal input. You know, for example, if your body starts to release a lot of cortisol, some people can thrive off that.
Right.
I'm being serious. Some people,
like the stress.
Yeah. Some people,
stress hormone, right?
Some people, when they get the stress hormone going, they perform at like high levels. Some people, however, when they get the stress hormone going, they lock up. Okay.
Which is the freeze.
Yeah, absolutely. So what rewiring the brain does is it's being able to, like with anything, program yourself to assimilate
kind of like behavioral psychology, cognitive behavioral psychology.
Similar.
Like exposing yourself to that stimulus.
Actually, it's more of a solutions focused therapy approach.
Jose, wouldn't you say then that with like the idea that you're bringing up, isn't it the same pathway in the brain for anxiety and excitement?
Absolutely.
So it's just no different.
100%.
Yeah.
The same exact pathway. And it's the interpretation.
Exactly.
Oh, so like anxiety and what was the other thing you said? I'm sorry.
Excitement.
Excitement is the same feeling. It's just how you're interpreting it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then from that interpretation becomes the release of dopamine, or, it could be high levels of cortisol. There's so many different things that happen in the body. I'm not a doctor, and that's about as far as I'll go from a neurological standpoint. But from a therapist standpoint, I do understand these flight or fight responses.
Right.
Okay. So what ends up happening is that from the practitioner, if you do not learn how to assimilate or to adapt to stress stimulus that are around you, then if you put yourself in an environment where you don't have an adaptation to that type of stressor, then you're going to have high quit rates. All right. This is where you have you have very low retention when it comes to white belts who end up going with blue belts that are just trying to massacre them.
Okay.
Okay. Cause they want to, So you have very low retention rates or very high, low retention rates. And then you have a very narrow-minded approach to how training should be. So you'll hear like euphemisms of, go hard or go home, or, you'll hear these things like, if you don't train hard every day, you're not doing the most. And that's not true.
Right.
It's not about training hard every day. It's about the quality of how you trained. So if I didn't sleep well one night, right? I'm very cognizant of my body and how my body reacts, and I'm listening to all my cues. If I didn't sleep well one night and I go to a 10 a.m. class and I know I only slept like 2-3 hours, dude, there's no way in hell I'm going to go grab Mr. Spazzy White Belt that he's going to sit there and not try to pass my guard. He's going to belly bomb over my guard. He's going to jump at me like Majin Buu and just like try to destroy me. My DBZ references. He's going to sit there and try to destroy me. And I've got to be cognizant and aware of my internal dilemma in response to my external factors.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I can still have quality training and not push myself harder than I needed to that day, which can result in injury.
Right.
Which can result in psychological defeatism.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. And that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Like there'll be some people that I have spoken to, like literally some athletes that I've spoken to, where I've had to have what I call a come to Jesus moment with them. I'm not going to mention any names, but they'll know who I'm talking about when I say this. And they lose in like major competitions.
Right.
And they prepared so much. And then they go through what every athlete goes through, which is kind of like the damn, I should have did this. Damn, I should have did. I mean, you've been there too, right?
Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll sit there and I'll say, but did you rest? Or I'll sit there and ask them, did anything change in your life? There's a sports therapist who's very popular. Actually, Jasmine Rocha uses him as well. His name is Sam Antonin. He's got a lot of good principles and perspectives, and I've actually sat through some of his stuff, and I'll tell you that one of the questions that he always has his clients ask themselves is, if you lost today, does anything change in your life?
Right.
And it really doesn't.
No.
At the end of the day, it really doesn't. I mean, you lost, there's this other euphemism that I'm kind of like, about.
You don't know if you like it or not.
Yeah. Because, people say you never lose, you learn. No, bro, you lost. Like it's the truth, because I'm a very literal person.
Okay.
It's part of a psychological approach. You can't sit there and try to treat somebody with sublimation and try to tell them, hey, no, it's okay. You didn't really lose. You learned. Yeah, you did learn, but you lost.
But you also lost.
Yeah.
It can be both.
Yeah, let's call it for what it is.
Right.
What did you learn from that loss?
Right.
I think that there's 3 core questions.
Okay.
From a psychological standpoint. And I think that any athletes that's listening to this today should really ask themselves these questions.